Well, welcome everybody. Fantastic to have you here. I was going to say welcome this afternoon, but I know that's just for me. It's my afternoon. You might be in the morning, might be approaching evening for you, wherever you are in the world. My name is Dan Lake. I'm the global head of delivery here at Adeption, and joined by my co-host Corey Criswell, our chief leadership officer here in the Americas. And we are super excited to have you here for this 30-minute kind of power session as we are really exploring kind of this idea of the reality of scaling, maybe what for many of us might be a dream leadership development process or project, and how do we scale to thousands of leaders? And so today we are joined, we have the privilege of having Danielle Willinger with us from GALLO, and formerly of Home Depot. And Adeption, Corey and I, we're partnering with Danielle and her team on developing thousands of leaders at GALLO across all leader levels over the next 5 years. So really excited to have her perspective on scaling leadership development. And just before we get started, I actually have a question for everybody. I'm going to drop it in the chat too, just for a little bit of visibility for you. But I'm a little bit curious as we get started, when you are trying to introduce a new, maybe it's an idea, a framework, something for your organization. What's the biggest lever that you use to kind of build trust with your stakeholders? So you've got that vision. You're saying, I want to scale something. I want to do something that I'm excited about, a framework, an idea, an approach. What helps you build trust, or what lever do you use? So some thoughts into the chat just as we get started here. Well, yeah, a bit of bridge build. I love that, Lorraine. Thank you for kicking us off. Some bridge building, some one-on-one connections. Yeah, there's a bit of a theme there. Lots of one-on-one conversations, a bit of data and research. Yeah, what's the story? How can I back that up a little bit? Nurturing relationships. I love that, Alistair. Yeah, seed the idea with some advocates, Olivia. I love that framing. That's a fun one. Yeah, figure out what matters to them and how this could help both the leaders and the business. I love that dual approach, Liz. Yeah, and then build on previous relationships. So experience, how does what I'm maybe bringing add some value to them currently, and what's maybe the picture I can paint of the future. So these are brilliant. If you're just joining us, you can still drop something in the chat on, what can we do to build trust. But these are great. So definitely take advantage of those. And I'm going to hand it over to Corey just to start us with some of our first questions here for Danielle.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Welcome, everyone. Fantastic to see some familiar faces and some new faces. And you're really in for a great experience learning from Danielle, as we have over the past 18 months or so. So, Danielle, you and I have talked a lot about the effort it takes to build stakeholder trust. So, my question is, when we're thinking about standing up a new leadership development program, we often just focus on what is the program going to look like, or in your case, programs. But the challenge is often the support structure required behind the scenes, hence Dan's question. So I'm curious, like, what did you have to put in place structurally? I'm thinking resources, governance, internal champions to ensure the organization could really support what is a pretty big rollout.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Glad to be on talking with all of you today. And great question, Corey. There was a lot of intentional effort we put in place up front in order to roll out this large of an initiative, that's scaling across multiple leader levels for the whole company. There were a few things. That one that comes to mind first is we were doing an org design for our L&D team shortly before rolling out this program. And it worked out that we centralized a lot of the shared learning resources under me. And so it's not often that I've seen in organizations where the person who is kind of initiating that leadership development strategy also gets to lead the instructional designers who are helping bring it to life, the facilitators who are going to teach it, the coordinators who are going to make all the magic happen, behind the scenes in the classroom, the LMS administrators who are going to set up all of the infrastructure in the system. And so that actually really helped us set up the structure to bring this to life. Not that that's needed for a rollout like this, but it was very helpful to centralize those resources and kind of push them towards this shared goal. Another thing that we did before the year before we kicked this off, we got this program called Leading at GALLO onto our top 5 HR OGSMs, which are our company strategies. And that really helped us every time. We all know all of the other priorities sneak up when we're trying to do something, and said, hey, this is on our top 5. This is our focus. This is our priority. If we can work in anything else, great. But it just gave us that North Star to say, this is our focus. This is where the resources are pointed. And that really helped. As far as processes go, we were very intentional in saying, hey, this is a pilot year. We're going to set up the infrastructure we know we need to do in order to get a pilot up and running, but we're not going to be so rigid about it that it can't modify and iterate as we go, right? And so I'll give you a quick example of our attendance policy, which seems very straightforward. But when you say 100% attendance is required for you to complete this program, there's a lot on the back end that you don't really realize at first goes into that, and thinking, hey, well, if somebody calls out sick, okay, now I have to move them to a new cohort, or I have to swap them into another class and then put them back into this cohort. And what effect does that have everywhere? So we started out with the policy, and we've kind of been building it as we have gone, and really gotten a good structure in place for that now. The last thing here that comes to mind is we had our CHRO, the head of HR, become the program sponsor, and recorded videos, and is in the platform, and is really influencing throughout the business for this, and that really helped. In addition, we got support from each and every executive, ELT member individually, and talked to them and got their feedback and got their input and got their support before moving forward with this, to really help with that buy-in up front. So we had everything in place to at least get started and then iterate as we went.
Fantastic. I really appreciate that, Danielle, particularly around just how early starting you were in thinking about what needed to be put in place to be able to really innovate at the scale. So that's kind of leads us into the next question. So, Adeption's approach to development, which you had identified you wanted to bring forward, is fundamentally different from traditional training. How
Mm-hmm.
did you build trust and manage stakeholders when you knew that this was the approach you wanted to take, but you couldn't easily prove it to them before getting into the work?
That was, I would say, one of the tougher and one of the more fun things to do related to this. And when we first started really moving toward, hey, we want to modernize leadership development at GALLO, blank slate, what does this look like? I was less than a year into my role at GALLO, not just to my role, but to being at GALLO. So I had brand new, relationships, hadn't had a long time to establish myself. So a couple of the things that I did really relied on some credibility from previous experience. So while I was new to GALLO, I had done leadership development for a long time at Home Depot. I had partnered, with Adeption before. I was very familiar with the type of leadership development I wanted to implement and knew could work at GALLO. So that helped. I think I also, I saw in the comments someone earlier said, did the research. I would say I had a lot of, I call it research-based passion. Like I had a lot of passion around this. I knew this is what could, really move the needle for GALLO. This was the way to go. But I couldn't just say, well, we should do this. I'm really passionate about it. Let's go, right? So it brought in the research in a way that wasn't, too collegiate, or that was applicable, right? Here's the research. Here's what I've done before that I know has worked well in another environment, and here's how this could work well in this environment, and here's the reasons, right? And work that in with storytelling and with getting some that emotional connection to it, and here's the impact we could make. Um, Another thing that I did that I wanted to mention, because it was maybe a little unconventional and people might not think of it. So just to throw out there, when I first started at Gallo, I joined an employee resource group and identified a women's one and identified an opportunity to bring in a vendor for the mentorship program. It was a very manual process. I identified the opportunity, sourced the vendor. I influenced the decision to implement the vendor, did the contract process, implemented the vendor, showed success. And so when it came time for me to do something similar on a much larger scale, I had already proven that I could do it in a separate space. And I think that really helped. And I always encourage, people think unconventionally about how can you show your credibility and your value in a different way before the stakes are really high, right? So that was one. I know a few people in the chat mentioned getting input from, a lot of stakeholders. Oh goodness, and meeting individually, personalizing, not just getting their input, but saying, hey, I heard you. Here's where I incorporated your input. Here's how it's showing up. And here's how it's going to make a difference in the program. And that really made an impact. We were also really careful not to frame it up as an HR initiative. I saw some people in the chat saying the business impact, right? Like this is not, hey, this is something HR thinks is cool. Like, hey, this is something we're involving business leaders in that's going to make an impact on the business. And here's how. And then I also multiplied my reach by getting some key people on board. Hey, here are a few people that I know, I don't have relationships with the people they do. So let me get them on board and then they can influence, and that influence spreads, right? When you can get more people involved to just expand the reach, especially if you haven't had time to build all the relationships yet. And then lastly, I was just really fortunate that Gallo leadership was super open, right, to trying something new, to trying a different approach to development, to hearing me out, to moving forward in this direction. It was just a really great opportunity to be able to move forward in this way.
I appreciate that, Danielle. One of the things I noticed, right, Dan and I noticed when we were working with Gallo leaders and in meetings is the sense of ownership that they had, that it felt like their program, they had invested in it. And so that was pretty exciting to have happen. With that, Dan, what are you curious about?
It's so good. I loved just the conversation that you just had and the pieces you shared there, Danielle. I'm a little bit curious on as you're scaling, and I think a lot of people on the call here will experience this. It feels like at scale you start to encounter some trade-offs. And so you have experience with Home Depot and now with Gallo with five really distinct leader levels. And so
Mhm.
how have you kind of navigated that? Flexing or that transition between different environments as you're scaling leadership development?
A great question, and they are very different environments. If you think about, Home Depot is about 50,000 leaders, almost 500,000 employees, at least when I was there, and then Gallo, still a substantial, company, but not nearly that the scale of Home Depot. A couple of maybe differences that I observed at both is at Home Depot, it was a lot of application to the masses, right? Which is great. You have so many leaders. How do I reach them all? How do I make this apply to everyone? What examples will resonate with a variety of audiences? It was much more, let's get new hires through versus everyone for a lot of the programs that I did. A lot more on the job activities are optional, not as much of a way to track them, things like that, and a lot more internal solutions. Amazing programs, just very different when you think about like that's just scale on a whole nother level, which is very doable, which is, the team there does an incredible job at leadership development. Where I had a unique opportunity at Gallo, even though it is still scaling to thousands of leaders, my focus was a lot more on how to personalize while you scale. And so it was much more how do we customize to the leader levels that you mentioned, have very specific tracks, make sure that it's relevant to the roles, lots of focus groups to understand like what really matters to people versus making it generic. We have heavy involvement from managers of participants who are very invested in the development of their, employees. We're leveraging a lot more wisdom of the crowd and hey, how do you bring your personal experiences in versus hey, we're going to teach you something, you should learn it. Hey, how do you pull from a lot of what you already know and from what your peers know? And we'll teach you a few things alongside that. And how do we personalize that? And everyone commits to those individual on the job actions and follows through. And we, coach them on the platform. There's just a lot more small, peer group interactions and connections and recognition, and just really making it more of a personalized journey while scaling it, right? And focusing on what are those things that work across the board and that we can multiply, but making it feel more like an individual experience that they're going through that means something to them.
I love that. What I so love is those kind of key words of like personalized experience and pulling really relevant examples. And so I think, that ability to lean into the personalized for each leader level or for each organization as appropriate in your experience. I so appreciate that. Corey, any other questions that are coming to mind for you?
Yeah, I'd love to ask one more before we move to Q&A. Thanks, Liz, for dropping a question in the chat. If you have a question for Danielle, we can probably get to a couple of them. So please add your question to the chat. Danielle, I'm curious about, this is leadership development across thousands of leaders, 5 leader levels. And because the system is interwoven, I'm curious about, a change in one area, one program can ripple across the other experiences. So, how do you keep the broader strategy steady when the individual parts evolve and they need to evolve?
This is the probably the hardest part of the whole thing is how to manage this, especially because we kicked off all. I mean, we started with the visionary, but we basically kicked off all 5 levels very close together. And so managing, and we've just to give some context, so far we started in January. So far this year, we've kicked off 15 different cohorts that we're managing, at the same time, and just adding more and more, kickoffs as we go. While taking a very nimble, iterative approach and applying feedback. And so you're exactly right. How do we manage, keeping that strategy, keeping our North Star, keeping that focus while making all of these changes and keeping track of it? And it's takes a lot of effort. I'm not gonna lie. It really but I will tell the team is just so wonderful here and keeping track of this and really motivated and really passionate. We have change logs, we have feedback meetings, we have a lot of version control, we have clear communication among the teams. As I mentioned, with the teams being centralized under me for shared resources, we've set up a lot of infrastructure in place to where we can openly communicate as things change. We can keep track of them. We're putting those systems in place. And it's just a really unique opportunity to incorporate feedback because if you have one class and then a couple weeks later, you might be teaching the same class to a different audience. So you can try new things, right? And we don't always get it right every time, but we learn from it and we iterate. And we also have a wonderful partner in Adeption to be able to help keep track of all of the details and understand the implications to changes and to try new things and to experiment, even though we're 8 months in, we're still trying a lot of new things. And so it's not it's not, I won't sugarcoat it. It's not something that I would say is super easier for the faint of heart, but it is very, very manageable when you have, again, such a wonderful, motivated, team in place and partners to work with and process to keep up with everything and people to hold, each other accountable to that.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Danielle. I'm going to hand to Dan. Want to take some questions from the chat?
Absolutely. And like Corey said, if you've got a question, definitely please drop it in the chat. You might have seen Liz's one there already, Danielle. Brilliant question. Just a little bit curious to hear more about how you've involved supervisors, particularly at, once you're below that most senior level. How do you keep supervisors engaged and involved as you're scaling development initiatives?
And just to clarify, is this supervised like supervisors of the participants that are in the program? How do we keep
Yeah.
them involved? Okay, great. Yes, so we have a before we kick off any new cohort, the first thing that we do is communicate to the managers of participants what's happening, what to expect, what the dates are, how to connect with their teams. And then we have kickoff just for the managers of participants to get their buy-in, to give them an overview of what to expect, to let them know how to participate, et cetera. And then we have in our learning management system, we have a separate learning journey for the managers. So they see, they do a couple leader check-ins with the participants. They have guides for those. They get to see, the participant journey throughout the experience. And then for a couple of the levels, we actually invite managers to the virtual wrap up so that they can see like what they've learned, the conclusion of the program, and really get that buy-in. So we're still learning, right? But it's a lot more than I've ever done in my experience to get managers involved, and it has really, really helped. To even just drive accountability for participants showing up to class and being engaged and trying new things and having space to experiment on the job. We've noticed a lot of differences because the managers are generally a lot more involved and expected to be more involved.
Mm. I love that you set that expectation and you're communicating up front. So no surprises and a really good invite continuously to be involved in their team members' journey. So um, there's a question in the chat here from Lisa, just around kind of the blend of in-person to virtual that you've either experienced or are currently experiencing. Any thoughts there?
Yeah. So we have it customized for each of the five leader levels, depending on we did a lot of research up front and meetings with leaders in the business to understand what would work best for each of the leader levels. So I can give you a couple of examples. So for our visionary leaders, which is our senior directors and VPs, it's a year-long program. They come together in person 3 times, and those are for about 2 day sessions each time. And then in between, we have share and reflects to bring them together to discuss what they've been trying, what they've been learning, what challenges they're seeing. They do virtual or in-person peer connects in between with their pod group. So that one is, and they do a lot of work in the platform as well, in the Adeption platform, a lot of actions and reflections and tools and things like that. So that one is a little bit heavier on the in-person. That's what was really valuable to that group in our initial research. And then for leader of leaders, for example, which is our senior managers and directors who have direct reports, they come together twice in person, and we do a series of virtual workshops that are 2 to 3 hours in between those in-person components. And so again, just kind of that group has a lot of people who are spread out more, across the country, a lot of different needs, demands for them, and that worked out a lot better for that audience. And it kind of varies for each. I won't go through each of the five, but it is just a blend based on the needs of that group.
That was super helpful to hear, Danielle. Thank you. I think we got time actually for Christina's question here. It was a really good question of sort of any wisdom from your own experience around kind of prioritizing kind of who's selected to be a part of cohorts, particularly maybe in the early stages of cohorts versus maybe something that's more to run state of scale. But any of your perspective on what would help people navigate that?
That is a great question. That is one of the things that I think I'm I'm very proud of how we have done this, and the way we did it was extremely labor intensive. And so I'll tell you what we did, and you take with it as with that note of it was labor intensive. So before we kicked this off, we worked with our HR business partners and our learning partners who coordinate it with the business to determine who could participate. And knew we wanted to get about 1,000 leaders through in the first year across the levels. And so they selected names. We gave them some criteria. So we wanted people who were, change advocates, who would be open about feedback, who were in good standing, who, et cetera, right? We had kind of a list of criteria. And we pulled together a lot of names on an Excel spreadsheet and have managed that. And we made it very much a, hey, you were nominated, you were selected to participate. We need your feedback. You are part of the pilot program. You were chosen for a reason. And it really, I think, drove, oh, I was selected. I'm going to be very engaged. I'm going to actively participate. I'm going to, right? And so it drove a lot of really great excitement and engagement. And it just generated a lot of what we wanted. It was just, again, a manual process to gather the names, to refine the names as people were changing roles as they do in an organization often. So we had to put some policies in place to kind of manage all of that change and the system, and it's evolved. And now we're switching more to using reporting to select people as you might normally do for a program like this. But if you have the capacity to administratively do it, I'd highly recommend, if you're doing a program like this, like really selecting and making people feel like it's an honor to go through this pilot experience, because that's really worked well for us.
That's so good. I love that. And I so appreciate your acknowledgement of uh, this may take some time, but it's worth the effort
Yeah,
to kind of
definitely.
do it and to do it well. So thank you. Corey, any additional kind of questions, comments from you?
Yeah, so I just want to say, Danielle, thank you so much for talking about how you enrolled people. They showed up differently in the classroom, knowing that they'd been chosen. So thank you for that. And just a massive thank you for sharing the human reality behind executing such a significant vision. It's incredibly grounding to hear about the real trade-offs and energy it takes to drive this work. I learned new things listening to you about what it took. To close our loop today, we're going to ask you to share in chat again. This goes out to everyone. So we always want to turn inspiration into action, and Dan's going to paste the question in. But I'm curious about a key insight that you're taking away, listening to Danielle about what this took to pull off. And here she is, 8 months into this program experience. And then what's a potential action that you would take? Those of you familiar with our B3 are recognizing that these are be better questions. So a key insight and a potential action. Please share those in chat. It helps to cement your own learning, and we know it also helps inspire others. While you're doing that, just a huge thank you for joining us, for sharing your insights in chat, and for being part of this community. We will send out the recording and a quick summary to everyone in just a few days here. Have a wonderful rest of your week. We'll see you at the next Global Chats. And Devin, I believe you're sharing a note about what is coming up next for us. We have an exciting event happening in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Thanks for dropping that, Devin. Thank you to everyone. Danielle, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.